Thank you guys for joining me today on my channel. My name, if you're new, my name is Heather Mattern. I am a writer mama. I'm the author of The Gray Muse and Love, Sex, and Other Miscommunications. Both are poetry collections. And yeah, so that's who I am. And on my channel, I talk all things writer, journaling, mom topics. So welcome, I'm glad you're here. And today I'm actually going to be sharing why I write. There is I don't know, everyone writes for a different reason. Some people write because they can't not write. They just have all these stories in their heads and they have to get them out. And I think maybe as a teenager that was me, and then somewhere along the way it shifted. Somewhere along the way I began writing so that I could heal, and that is why I write. Each of my books that have been published are the healing journeys for me. And so I wanted to start actually by sharing within each one of my books where the idea came and why, and a little bit more in depth about why each individual book was written. I'm actually going to start with the book I did not show you. I wrote, my very first book was a romance, and you won't find it on my website. I don't talk about it a whole lot. It was kind of my beginning into figuring out what the indie publishing world looked like and what it was all about, and it taught me a great amount of things along with healing. So my first book, Saving Katie Baker, is a new adult-ish romance, and I will be doing I'm thinking about doing a video all about this book and all about the what not to do when you publish your first book, because this is definitely it definitely taught me what not to do. So I want to start by sharing just a little bit about this, because this is, like I said, this is my first book that was published. It has lots of mistakes in it, and I tend not to mention it, I think partially because of that, but it is part of my story, so that's why I wanted to start there. And you can even notice there's a different name. I mean, H. Mattern versus my Heather A. Mattern. But that's, once again, that will be in that video, so I'll go into more details about this book then. But this book is part of, like I said, this is my my journey, and the story came to me because it was based off of a disaster that occurred in Alabama. There were these tornadoes that came through, and it was close to where my grandparents lived and where I grew up my early years. And so when all that was going on, and the paper, all the articles in the paper about it, it was horrible, and it was really bad. My grandfather had already passed away, and I didn't necessarily realize how much grief I still hadn't gone through with the loss of my grandfather. And so when the tornado was happening, all that kind of came up, and I lost my grandfather, and then shortly after that I lost my cousin. And both of them, I was a totally different person back then when I knew them, and so they really never got to know me now, and I was a much more judgmental person, and so our relationship was tainted, I guess you could say. And so I held a lot of guilt and grief over that, and writing this book, even though it's fiction, it's completely fiction. It's based off of that disaster that happened in Alabama. But the characters are fiction, the story is fiction, but writing it, even a fiction book, gave me closure on the opportunities I missed with my grandfather and my cousin. And it is dedicated to them. You'll have to excuse I'll tell you about my first big launch party and what all this other handwriting is, but I did dedicate the book to them and have their images in it. But it was, like I said, I wrote it, and when I wrote it, I don't think I knew that I was writing it to heal. But it was definitely part of it. And along those same lines, when I wrote my second book, The Gray Muse, I didn't write it to heal. Like, I didn't write it to have it published. I wasn't aware that that's what was happening. But the idea for this came in a photography class that I was taking at a retreat. And I'm trying to be careful how I phrase things, because there are certain people that might find my video. But the story behind this, I was dealing with a lot of emotional stuff. I was dealing with depression and anxiety, and a bunch of emotional things were happening in my life. And at this photography course, it was a course on self-portraiture, I met my old woman, you could say. So in it, the leader that was leading us through this photography course was basically sharing and trying to get us to speak differently to ourselves, as if it is your mother figure, your mother speaking to you as a child. And when she mentioned that, I got this image of my 90-year-old self looking at my self, my 30-year-old self. And my 90-year-old self is looking at her, and she's not speaking the same language I was speaking to myself in the present. She was speaking a language that was full of love and light and grace and permission. And so basically that experience changed me, and I started writing letters as if they were from my 90-year-old self to my 30-year-old self. And that's what this book was. That's how this book came about. And through those letters, through those love notes, I healed my anxiety and depression. And even now, if I have days where I just don't feel open, I don't feel, I don't know, I just don't feel like myself, I will write myself a love note from my future self, and it does change perspectives. So that was how that book came about. And lastly, I started this book a couple of years ago, Love, Sex, and Other Miscommunications. This book, after writing this was a very heavy, it's not depressing, but it is a much darker collection of poetry, because it does deal with depression and anxiety and the darker parts of being alive. And so I knew that I wanted to write something that was a little lighter, a little more upbeat. And so I started a collection of love, love poems. And that collection of love poems totally turned into something completely different, not what I anticipated. But my husband and I have been married for 15 years. And the last, I would say 3, have been up and down and hell, and it's been really interesting. And so I wrote this for the past couple years. I've been keeping a book and writing my poetry in there. So you have the love poems, and then you have I'm sitting in my car at a coffee shop because I had to get out of the house and away from you poems. And so that's what this one is. This is the roller coaster that is marriage, that is love. It's the chaotic beauty. And writing it and then going back through and rewriting it and editing it, it healed any of those, I don't know, those spots that still needed work in our marriage. And so yeah, that's why I write. I don't know that I think about it when I'm writing it, But the topics that come to my soul are always the topics that I'm dealing with right there in that present moment. The things that I feel passionate about. And when I write those, when I listen to my intuition and write the things that are asking to be written, the things that need to be written for myself, not for anyone else, but the stories and the poetry that I need to read, those are the books that, I don't know, they shine. They are my, I don't know, they're my babies, kind of, you know? And so writing for me is very much like therapy. I'm a big journal mama too. So, yeah, I write to heal. I write to heal the holes in my heart that weren't washed away by the rainstorms, is what I like to say. So I'm glad that you joined me. I would love to know why you write. If, you know, there are other writer mamas out there that are watching this, what's your reason? What's your why? I am very curious to find out.